Poll question is, what's your excitement level for the Four Nations Faceoff, which begins tonight, Canada versus Sweden in Montreal. Finland plays the USA Thursday. 39% of you saying average, 37% of you saying not at all, and only 24% saying high, very high excitement level for the Four Nations Faceoff. Mike Richards, the inimitable and iconic Mike Richards, what are you voting in that poll? He's not voting at all. He's abstaining. He's abstaining from voting. Hit refresh, the boys are telling me to tell you, Mike, and you can hear it. By the way, the photo that we put on our thumbnail promoting Mike Richards' appearance today, he really looks a lot like Donald Trump in the photo. I don't know if he's trying to. I don't know. But it was startling.
What about now? Is this? Can you hear me now?
Up. We got you. I got you. The build-up, the suspense. Finally. What's your answer? How you voting?
Yeah, I said I'm probably in that 30 to 40% range. I realize it's a dress rehearsal for what we're going to see. I do love international hockey. I think it's when guys, they really bleed for their country, and they all do. We tend to think it's just our guys. No, they all do. I think when you go around the world, when you go to these tournaments, I think it was such a huge eye-opener when I was in Ufa, Russia, covering the World Juniors, to see the people in the the Ural Mountains. That's right. I'm saying Ural Mountains. The way that it was very much like probably how junior hockey is in Western Canada. Like the food was all made by babushkas, these grandmothers. They were making like baked goods and stuff like that. Like it was, I was filling my face with Russian pastries, and there was an excitement. And I've never, I swear to God, and this is, I'm talking about the Sea of Red being in Calgary. I've never been in a building that was as loud as it was for those Russian players when they started doing that weird Russian chant they do, which translates to them just yelling "puck." I know, trust me, it's a very strange, but the roof almost came off. It was really quite amazing. So international hockey, yeah, I love it. I'll wait and see. It's nice to see our best, but it's four teams. There's politics, of course, which we're just drowning in this world currently. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a distraction, but I understand why people are like, half and half.
Yeah, fair. Absolutely fair. Tony in Cochrane, Alberta writes that he says the Summit Series featured Tretiak versus Tony Esposito in goal. That was amazing, for sure. BW in Edmonton says $20 on Finland to win it all. That's because they're the fourth favorite. He thinks he could win some money there. I get it. And we do have some breaking news. 2 items from the CFL. Rough Riders have signed free agent offensive lineman Sean McEwen, and the Calgary Stampeders have released Demario Houston, a guy that found himself in a legal scrape last week. Anyways, you wanted to come on, I felt like, talk a little NFL, little Super Bowl. What do you got for leftovers there?
A couple of things, looking at, just sort of pondering because of all the sports that we watch in this household. And, what I always find interesting, always have, and has always been my perspective, hosting shows is the current trend in a sport that finds success. So some people will say cyclical. I don't quite see it as cyclical in any sport, but there are certain trends that come into vogue only because of, look, it could be a bunch of different things. It could be the kind of athlete you could have. It could be, what sort of comes out of college. What kind of, version of the game are they seeing? So RPOs, as we saw, the Chip Kelly thing out of Oregon all those years ago, which we saw just basically, assimilate itself through all the rest of football. And what really, to me, stood out this year after that championship, and to me, what I believe to be the most important takeaway from it, it's not necessarily the players, it's the coaches. It's coaching. Now, my take always has been, along with my good friend Pierre Maguire, that coaching matters. And sometimes it's really, people say, well, isn't that sort of obvious? No, it's not. Because when you take a look at what Philadelphia did with Sirianni and Vic Fangio, and these are the reasons that they won, because they beat a really good coach. Andy Reid is an outstanding coach, and he got out-coached in one of the biggest games. Now, again, I was on this show a couple of weeks ago saying I didn't think Kansas City would be at this game. I believed it was going to be the Buffalo Bills. The Bills got outcoached. I mean, and I'm sick of hearing about the referee thing. Look, I'm not much of a conspiracy guy, and I always think if you take care of business, 1 or 2 calls, it really wouldn't matter if you're putting the boots to somebody. I mean, make some bad calls. That's really what sportsmanship really was all about in its day. I play you, Rod, and all of a sudden we think some calls are going bad or whatever. Both you and I accept that part of the game, part of the sportsmanship is, yeah, they're going to mess up some calls. Some calls go your way, some go mine. I don't need 400 replays of the same thing to see if there's toes in. If I'm taking care of business, none of those things matter. To me, the biggest thing and the takeaway in this is coaching. So when you take a look at what you have, if you're Sean McDermott, if you're in Buffalo, did you do a good enough job with the athletes that you had to beat that team? The answer is no. So I'm not going to take a look at, the Josh Allen. I thought that, again, all year they did a very good job in a very different way. But at the end of the day, coaching matters. That is certainly one takeaway. And the other is, if you don't have an elite quarterback, and people say, well, isn't that obvious? No, not always. Not every year. There are different ways in the NFL. There's different ways in the CFL that guys have won because of the athletes they have. You have an all-world guy, or you have an all-world defense, for instance. But Philadelphia had all of it, and they had a very elite quarterback. I know a lot of people don't want to talk about it. Jalen Hurts isn't exactly the most popular guy in the world. But the reality is a serviceable guy won't win you a championship anymore. Just having a good defense won't win anymore. And guess what? Lo and behold, I know it's 2025. Guess what? A running game. That's right, a running back. You put that all together with probably the best offensive line in football, and I got news for you. Championship.
Yeah, well, good luck with the Bills. I feel like you're sitting here wondering if they'll ever win, like Vikings fans.
Yeah.
And right? I guess there's no answer
as I said,
to that.
I like Josh Allen, and I'm not, being a degenerate gambler. Sometimes I like him, sometimes I don't. I probably deep down don't have a favorite team, but I just love football of all kinds. And when I say all kinds, I'm talking about high school football. I'm talking about U Sport. I'm talking about NCAA. My love for the CFL is pretty obvious. Growing up with it, it's like, Labor Day to me is a religious holiday. The Grey Cup is sacred in my family, but I also love the NFL. I don't pick and choose the kind of football I want. I love it all at all levels for all different reasons. I'm not going to sit here and cry over certain things. Like I get a CFL fan that it becomes very protectionist. Look, I do understand that. But at some point, we all got to grow up. We all got to get with, we have the game that we have and get behind it because it's still good football. But sometimes this sucks and this league is terrible. Yeah, there used to be a time where what I had said, the no fun league, absolutely, because that's the way it was. It was boring. It was smash mouth football. It was grinding out these running backs that they averaged 3.2 yards per carry, and I hated it, but not now, folks. So if we're looking at our own game here in Canada, we have to take a real serious look at what we do, how we play the game, and not point fingers other directions. This is our game. If you want to make it better, then we got to grow up a little bit.
And this is the time to do it. They're at a crossroads as they look for their next commissioner, and I hope that they get it right. Now, hang on. God, I admire you, Mike, as you know. And I was supposed to pass along a message to you. It was from Ron McLean. And he said, can you please tell Mike that Don Cherry's favorite impression of Mike Richards was of Don Cherry? Can you do a grapes for us? Do you have one in your bag of tricks down there?
Let me tell you something right now. A lot of people getting upset, and I don't want to say you people. I just say people, all right? So here we go. We got a great thing going on for countries. The best one, we know who it is, eh? You got Sid out there. Holy Christ, I think, what is he? He's 57 years old. He's still a beauty. He's still a good one. The only mistake I think they made and everything like that is, where's Dougie Gilmore? You need Dougie out there. He's a great guy. Kingston, Ontario. He's got everything. Tragically hip, too. Not bad, eh? A couple songs sucked. But otherwise, Kingston, great thing, and they need a couple of guys from Toronto, but don't get me started, eh? Just don't get me started.
Bingo! How about that?
Ooh, and that's not bad. Ladies and gentlemen, he had no idea I was going to bring that up. He had no idea. That's the talent of Mike Richards for you, ladies and gentlemen. Do you want to go on before I ask more questions?
Well, the
Different
one thing I
question.
was going to talk about, because people will say, what about the Leafs? They start talking about, the NHL, and it was always, oh, you're in Toronto, what about the Leafs? I said, look, I've had this conversation. It's like talking about the same movie for 10 years. The ending
I know.
is always the same. And I thought, okay, for the obsession that it is, and we talked about trend in sports right off the top. What wins? Okay, so sport is by virtue of how it exists, the animal that it is basically copycat. What someone else does, what they find success in, you want to do the same thing. And so, okay, so let's go to the Stanley Cup champions, and you take a look at what's happening this year and just look at the metrics. Now, I'm not a huge analytics guy, but it does give you a story, at least a foundation of what you have. And so if I'm looking at the Florida Panthers and I go down the first 6, 7 guys, I take a look, it's plus minus, if you want to get into that, time on ice, blah, 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 goals scored. But the thing to me is, what is it about those players? And they're good players. I'm not saying it's the greatest alignment, greatest roster I've ever seen, but what they do have, and this is why they won, at least when I look at it, you just go down and take a look at the penalty minutes. Are they type of guys who will score and then turn around and maybe punch you in the face? My version of big boy hockey that starts in May and ends almost in July means that when I tussle with you, you're afraid that not only am I going to score on you, but I'm going to throw you through the glass. That intimidation, that's one trend that has never, ever, ever gone away in the National Hockey League. So if I'm looking at the Florida Panthers and I'm taking a look at the Leafs, right, the God's chosen team here in Ontario, and you take a look at those numbers, well, the guy who has the most goals and most points, 55 assists, is Mitch Marner. What does he have? What are his penalty minutes? Was he 1? Did he get a half a penalty? And people are like, well, he's not supposed to do that. But if you go down the top 6 or 7 compared to Florida, I got news for you. And I had a conversation the other day, actually, with a guy from an insurance company who was originally from Saskatchewan. He was working in Calgary now in the insurance business. He said, what do you think the biggest difference is between all of this? Because he was a Leaf fan. I said, well, if you watch the OHL and then you watch the dub, there's a huge difference. In Western Canada, there is just something that is very old school. If you want to call it Wild West, if you want to call it working with your hands, if you want to call it prairie living, if you want to call it river hockey, whatever the Sutters are, all those kinds of things that I saw, certainly when I followed the Calgary Hitmen, there is an ability for those kinds of individuals, those athletes, that they understand that they're not out there to do one thing. They're never the guy from out west to me never just decides I'm going to be a goal scorer. That just doesn't happen culturally in that part of the world. And the teams that are able to mix up, I can score on you, but I can beat you up. That is also the as I talk about sometimes at that time of year, I compare things to models of cars. Like, what is the car of the year? Well, if we're talking about the Stanley Cup, it's an SUV. Clearly, it's an SUV. It's not a convertible. It's not a Mitch Marner sports car with the top down in the summertime. It's got to go through snow, and it's got to have big tires, and it's got to have a chassis. And guess what? It also has to be fast. So it has to have all those kinds of things in order for you to win. Look at the Winnipeg Jets are an interesting, if you look at sort of by the numbers, because they're sort of a mix of what Florida does, but they've got a little of that track meet in them from what the Leafs do. But the biggest caveat for the Winnipeg Jets is Hellebuck. At some point, you have to beat him, and an all-world goalie, which, by the way, was one of the trends beforehand that we all recognized in the National Hockey League. And I think it was Scott Taylor used to say, well, you have to call it playoffs because you can't call it goalie. Well, that is very, very true. Except now, that is a rarity, I would say, Rod. You need a consistent goalie. In fact, that might even be closer to the old Grant Fuhrer, which is you might let in 3 or 4 goals, but when it really counts, your guy makes the save. Because that's what Grant Fuhrer did. I forget about his goal against average. He didn't care what it was. It wasn't important. But they knew if Fuhrer had to make that save and then Gretzky and whoever else goes down the ice and scores a goal, that's what made the Oilers the Oilers. It's not that way necessarily today. Like, obviously, it's not the 80s. You don't need an all-world goalie. But Winnipeg has got this formula that looks kind of interesting. And you know what? They certainly, by my account, that you could be looking at a Stanley Cup in Winnipeg, which to me would be fantastic. It's not happening in Toronto. It's just simply not going to happen for the same reason we talk about certain football teams. I've said for a long time, I don't expect to see a national or a world championship in Dallas for the Cowboys the way that it's run. With Jerry, I just don't see the team ever being bigger than Jerry. And if that's the case, it doesn't matter who you bring in. You never have full reins of the team. If you don't have that, you also don't have the respect of the players. They'll take the paycheck, but you ain't winning. You're not winning.
How about that?
Kelly Kirsch was a Leaf fan?
Kelly Kirsch was not a Leaf fan. No, I don't believe the Rocket was a Leaf fan. No.
Just teasing you, man. Okay. Mike, that was awesome, brother. Thank you so much. You got the City TV thing going. What's the latest?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on that we have to deal with, and quite honestly, it ain't Calgary. Calgary's awesome. The people out there have done a marvelous job, and there's a lot of things that probably for me are happening in Calgary, but you got to get through Toronto. And guess what? They're a little lazy. Old Dave who sits in his office or whatever, who decides about time slots and those kinds of things, we have to deal with that. But I think we might have a little bit of a workaround for me, and do expect me to be on airwaves soon in a different way, maybe to start than I thought. But it something will be worked out, and I again am very excited about it. And it probably is going to be happening within less than 30 days. So probably by the next time I visit you,
Okay.
whatever's going to be starting at that point will definitely be going.
Good to hear. All right, Mike. Let us know so we can pass it along. Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, brother. Always the best.
The iconic Mike Richards joining us from the GTA. It's just you and me the rest of the way, all right? Get the Progressive Insurance text line fired up and send us some notes, 902-518-3033, or the YouTube and Facebook chat. We'll be right back here on Game Plus TV, streaming live, as I just said, and podcasting wherever the best podcasts are found.